is tempted like as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore draw near with boldness unto the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and may find grace to help us in time of need. And so let's think there about verse 16. What we see here is, of course, we talked about this just slightly before before we actually got to the verse. There are some other verses that we kind of mentioned that had the same thought process, but verse 16, that first part says, "Let us therefore draw near with boldness unto the throne of grace." And so, why it says therefore, and of course, you probably were taught just as I was in grade school. When you have a therefore, what happens? You got to find why it's there for. You got to find what it's there for. So therefore, we have to go back and see why this is important. And so it says, "Let us therefore draw near with boldness unto the throne of grace." The answer comes before this. And the answer is very simple. We have Jesus Christ. We have His sacrifice for us. We are saved from our sins. As long as we're following Him, then everything is taken care of. And so that's why you see the therefore. Therefore, because we have Jesus, because He has sacrificed Himself for us, because we have forgiveness of sins, because we are obedient to Him, all those things are important, then we see that we can then come boldly before God. And of course, last week we talked about how, when we come boldly before God, that's not kind of an arrogance kind of a thing. Words have meanings, and when you're looking at being bold, maybe in our society we might think of the word bold as being arrogant. That's not what we're talking about here. We're being confident. Now, I'm gonna say this too. I've heard so many people talk about these professional athletes, and they'll say that they're confident. And sure, they are confident, but they try to say, well, they're not arrogant. They're just confident. They know that they're gonna hit that shot. They're gonna make that pass. They're gonna score that goal. They're gonna do those things, and they're confident in themselves. Well, they may be confident, but there is a line there that can be crossed, and you can go from confidence to arrogance really quickly. A doctor needs to be confident, and he's going to open up your body and try to work on you, right? And he needs to be able to be confident. A doctor that may be arrogant may think he can do what he's going to do and actually not be able to provide, maybe not be able to do it. There's a difference between arrogance and confidence, and basically, you cross the line when you start thinking more about yourself. You're crossing the line whenever you're more about yourself than whatever it is that you're doing. I've always appreciated it whenever I've watched those interviews after a game, where, especially like in a team sport like football. And you have the quarterback. They always talk to the quarterback. He's thought of as the leader of the team. And whenever they ask him questions, a lot of times what do those quarterbacks say? Sometimes you get this guy. He'll go, "Well, I knew I had him. I knew I could do this, and that's where we're at. We won because I knew that I had that guy wide open, and I could make that throw." You have some of that, but a lot of times, I love hearing this, a lot of times you hear these quarterbacks, they'll get up and they'll say, "Well, you know what, I really got to thank my offensive line because they protected me, in the pocket, allowed me to make that throw." And you think about that. Yeah, the quarterback made the throw, but there was somebody catching it, and then there's a lot of people protecting him from getting tackled. If there were no offensive line and there was nobody to catch that ball, he'd just be throwing that thing into the ground. So yeah, there's a big difference between confidence. He had confidence in his fellow players. That's not arrogance. He's saying, "Look, I was only able to do that because I have good teammates around me," and you love to see that. And so that's really just kind of a synopsis of what you see here with the idea of boldness and confidence, and the idea of what we're supposed to be like when we're approaching the throne of grace. It says that we may receive mercy and may find grace to help us in time of need. And so, what we need to, whenever we go to God, and when we go to God in prayer, we need to be confident in what we're saying. We need to understand that. That reminds me of James chapter 1, doesn't it, to you? When you think about James chapter 1, you have the idea of when you go to God in prayer, what do? You don't go to Him doubting. You go to Him in faith. And so that's the same principle being laid forth here. Anybody have any comments before we move on? All right, let's go into the study questions. You had the memory verse. Of course, that should be Hebrews 4, 11 and 12 is a familiar passage to us all, I believe. But number 2, it says, according to verse 2, what is the difference in the hearers? Let's stop right there. What is the difference in the hearers? What do you have? Yep. Yeah, so some people heard it, and they had faith, and so that's what, ended up being the end result for them. They were obedient because they heard it, and they heard it with faith. Then the next part of this question is this still applicable to today? Absolutely. How so? You think about it today, there's a lot of people that they hear, and I'm always saddened whenever, I've had several studies that go well, and I'm thankful that I haven't had as many that have gone badly as I have that have gone well. But those that go badly, man, those hurt. They hurt a lot, especially if you care about somebody and they just refuse. They refuse the gospel. They refuse the truth. It is sad. And I know that many of you have felt that pain when you've talking about loved ones and friends that you've tried to bring to the Lord. That is that's hard. But yeah, there are people that are just not going to hear. Sometimes I remember as a kid, I would think about, if I could just think about what the perfect way to say something was, then maybe more people would follow God. And I don't know if any of you have ever had a thought like that. Maybe there's just a perfect way to say something in which a person, maybe even just an individual, will hear it and obey. Well, here's the thing. That's a false thought, and I'll tell you why. Jesus, he had the ability to read people's hearts, and he could tell what they were thinking without them saying a word. And we know that from a couple of different occasions in the gospel accounts. But that being said, did everybody follow Jesus? No. Not everybody follows today. Not everybody followed him then. And that's something to remember. As much as we would like for everybody to obey, not everybody is going to obey. Yeah. 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 It is a, what is that? Yes, yeah. They're convinced, not converted, yep. There's a lot of people, I think, today in the church that are like that, that they know what is right, but they don't want to do enough, to make things right in their own life. They know what the Bible says. Maybe they grew up in the church, but they don't care enough to follow through. And man, that is obviously, that's a sad thing. Anybody else having comments before we move on? Yes. And we've got to be honest with that too. If someone says, look, that doesn't fit my lifestyle, let's be honest, how many of us did it fit our lifestyle? Even if you grew up in the church, I did. But once I really understood what was going on, once I really understood what I needed to do as a Christian, I knew that there's a lot of things that I had to do differently. Anybody else? Good comments. All right, number 3. What is the significance of Jesus being the great high priest?
Certainly he has the power of being a mediator. The old high priest, they would present sacrifices, and that was supposed to push sins aside, but Jesus has much more power.
Yeah. How did I know that Bill was going to say that? He's been teaching Exodus and Deuteronomy. So yeah, I figured Bill was going to speak up if no one else did.
That period of time, the high priest was all in authority.
Yeah.
Everybody looked up to him.
That's right. Yeah, he was. In some ways, not exactly the same way. Sometimes that's what people do to preachers. They look at him as like, oh, he's, high and mighty. In the denominational world, if I go out and I say I'm a preacher, someone thinks of me much more highly than they even ought to, just because of how they view the pastors of the denomination. Like one time I was talking to somebody and they said, they asked me what I did, and I said, well, I'm a preacher and I preach for this congregation. And they said, oh man, so are you like they said, are you the youth pastor, or do you run the show? And I said, well, if you're asking if I'm the main preacher, that's what I am, yeah. And it's interesting the way people think about stuff. But yeah, the high priest was the only one who really had that link to God there, Was that?
He was the mediator.
Yeah, he was the mediator.
Between the people, Israelites and God.
Yeah.
I don't think it's an accident that the term great high priest is used, because it just puts Jesus up here as compared to any comparison of any earthly high priest that the Jews had in their time.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that sets him apart is he was tempted in all points like we are, yet he did not sin. So he
Yeah.
knows what we go through.
Yeah. So, do we need to go over question number 4 now?
Jesus was human.
Yeah. So, of course, explain what it means that Jesus was in all points tempted like as we are. So, Jesus went through all the same temptations that are given to man. We did even mention last week. It's not talking specifics here. We're talking about categories and not specifics. Like, has Jesus ever walked into a bar and been hit on by a woman, that wasn't his wife? We're not talking about specifics here. We're not talking about, sinful situations. What we're talking about is the fact that just as like, and by the way, you shouldn't be walking into bars, guys. Just to be clear. But anyway, Jesus was tempted in all points, just like we are. Just as far as the lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and vainglory of life, all those things. Anybody have anything else to say about that? All right. Let's look at this next paragraph here. We'll read through verse 5, through verse 6. And we're about to start getting into some good stuff, in my opinion here. We're starting to get to the meat of Hebrews. And you're going to find that a lot of what has been taught on Hebrews is very true. You're going to find some little things here and there as we go on that for some reason people have taught it wrong, and we'll prove that in a little bit. We'll be getting there, but anyway, you'll be able to see that, I think, very very easily. But I'm not sure why we've had so much trouble in certain aspects of the book of Hebrews. I remember even talking to a teacher of mine that was teaching on the book of Hebrews, and he had taught something that was different than what I had studied and read, and I went and I asked him, and he agreed with me with what I said, and I just went away kind of dejected because I was like, that is pretty much the opposite of what you just said, So like I don't even understand how we can agree on this when I clearly did not say the same thing you did, and so we're kind of getting to the meat of Hebrews, and I think it's kind of exciting here. Let's look at verse 1. For every high priest being taken from among men is appointed for men and things pertaining to God, that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices for sins, who can bear gently with the ignorant and erring, for that he himself also is compassed with infirmity, and by reason thereof is bound, as for the people, so also for himself to offer for sins. And no man taketh the honor unto himself, but when he is called of God, even as was Aaron, so Christ also glorified not himself to be made a high priest, but he that spake unto him, Thou art my son, this day have I begotten thee. As he saith also in another place, Thou art priest forever, after the order of Melchizedek. So we'll stop right there, and before we get into the Melchizedek stuff too deeply. But you see some things, I think, popping up that we've already discussed a little bit. But it says, for every high priest being taken from among men is appointed for men in things pertaining to God, that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices for sin. And so, of course, this is, when it says from among men, this is speaking specifically of the Levites. And in Exodus 28 and verse 1, it says, And bring thou near unto thee Aaron thy brother, and his sons with him from among the children of Israel, that he may minister unto me in the priest's office. And so these are all, this is just an example here that, of there is a certain tribe and a certain family that this was all supposed to happen under. And so all the high priests, they were taken priests were taken from the tribe of Levi. And it says, for men. So what were they to do? They were to serve. They were to serve men. I cannot help but think how exhausting this could have been. How having to do all the things that they had to do. As a preacher, getting ready for, Bible classes and sermons and, doing some visitation and, writing some stuff from time to time. You can get tired doing those things, but I don't know that compares to what the high priest had to do.
Was there an age limit on them? At a certain age, that they were not allowed to do that anymore?
I don't know what that was. Does anybody know that off? It's one of those things that you just kind of vaguely know, and you don't know the exact. No, I don't know off the top of my head. I guess nobody else does either, so we're all in the same boat. So he's the high priest is taken from among men, taken from the tribe of Levi. He's appointed for men. He's doing this in the place of other people. He's doing this. He's being a servant. He's ministering. As we saw in Exodus 28 and verse 1, that was the word used for what the priests were going to do. The priests in general were going to serve. They were going to be so busy with the things that they were doing, they weren't even going to be able to take care of themselves like anybody else would do. They were going to be in service to the people spiritually, that the rest of the people were going to have to take care of them through their offerings and things. That's an interesting concept. Even still today, there are people, of course, that since we're there is a little bit of relation. We're not talking about the same exact thing, of course, when you speak of a high priest or even just a priest, but there is a little bit of a relation to preachers being ministers, and how these priests were ministering all the time, and they couldn't take care of, sometimes, you have people that would go out, and like Paul did, and we oftentimes call it making tents, that they would go, and we have preachers today that do that same thing. But I've often been told, and I know this from just experience by preaching while I was in preaching school, and sometimes you'll see these congregations saying, "Hey, we need a preacher," and they'll say, "You know what? We want a part-time preacher." You know what the difference between a part-time preacher and a full-time preacher is? It's the pay. That's all there is. As far as the support that he is given from the congregation, there really seems to be no difference in that. They still want you there for the funerals and the weddings. They still want you there to write the bulletin articles, or to have the personal Bible study with them over something that they need to better understand. The preaching and the teaching, all that. They still expect all that. They just can't support a person, full time. Of course, the system that they were under, these priests, they were taken care of by the people. And later on, when you see synagogues coming into play, they would put a synagogue in a place where there were at least 10 families. Now, why is that significant? Why is 10 significant? So they could support them, because you know what? If you're gonna tithe these different things, then you're able to fully support when you have at least 10 families together. So that's an interesting concept.
I've got the answer to the question, by the way.
All right, go ahead.
Numbers 8:24 through 26. It says, "This applies to the Levites. Men 25 years old or more shall come to take part in the work of the tent of meeting, but at the age of 50, they must retire from their regular service and work no longer."
Yeah.
25 to 50.
25 to 50. That was the answer. Well, very good. I was thinking, because a person cannot have the blemishes in order to be a priest. I wondered what age would be appropriate at that, because like at some point in time you start getting the blemishes on your skin and all those kind of things because of age. So I don't know. That's good. Thank you very much. So 25 to 50. So of course, the priest offered sacrifices for himself and for the people, and the gifts here may refer to the bloodless offerings that were given. And of course, sacrifices refers to, of course, the bloody offerings that were given. And we need to also at this point too remember that there is a difference between a prophet and a priest. Sometimes we look at those in a similar fashion, but there is a difference. Of course, God spoke to men through the prophets, but man approached God through the priests. And so those are very important distinctions. It's showing which way communication is being given. The prophets were to give the information from God, and the priests were to be able to basically communicate with God for man.
No different today.
Yeah, no different today, really. Yeah.
If you go through Christ, you need to God.
Yep, that's right. Anybody have any comments as we go on to the next part here?
I was reading a little bit on Bert Kaufman. He said that he was wondering why the writer, which we assume was Paul, was trying to get these people that were talking about going back into Judaism, why he was explaining this priesthood to them. He said that, we go back into Matthew 22nd chapter, where Jesus was talking to the Pharisees. And he said, "What do you think of the Christ? Who is he?" And they
Yeah.
You know, said because talking about Christ coming from the tribe of Judah, he couldn't be an earthly priest.
Yeah.
That kind of hit him and slapped him in the face. So, you know, there's some strange things going on here, and that's why Paul was trying to correct these things. Set these people straight that Christ is our high priest. He did come from the tribe of Judah, but God set him up as our high priest.
Yeah. And of course, you know, as we're about to get into the Melchizedek stuff, that explains how he can be high priest. You know, so that is that's something we'll be getting into soon. Probably not all that much tonight, if any. But man, you had. I was thinking about this when you were saying that. I thought, you know, things haven't changed very much, have they? Because, you know, back in those times, the Jews were looking for you know, that earthly Messiah, basically a king to come and rule. And when Jesus came, you know, he was setting up a spiritual kingdom. And what do people do today? You know, there are a whole lot of premillennialists out there that they're like, oh, here comes this. You know, we're waiting for that earthly kingdom to come. That's like you didn't get it. You didn't get it the first time. You know, they didn't get it then. You can't learn from their mistake, so you're just going to repeat it. So that's an interesting thought. Anybody have any comments else before we move on to verse 2? It says, who can bear gently with the ignorant and erring, for that he himself also is compassed with infirmity. And so, you know, he has compassion on the ignorant. Now, you know, when you consider just the fact that when you've been somewhere, you go, okay, you know what, I can feel like I can have some empathy for you. You know, I have never had cancer. I can go, man, I know what it's like to be sick. I don't know what it's like to go through chemotherapy. I don't know any of that. And so while I can, you know, have just a little bit of empathy, someone who's actually gone through cancer, talking to somebody who's going through cancer, they can really bring that one home, right? They've been there. So yeah, that's kind of the point being made here, is that, you know, Jesus can be patient with us, that because, you know, he's been here, he's done the things that you know, he's been through the things that we have to go through. He knows what it's like to be a human being. In Numbers 15, verses 27 through 31, it says, and if one person sin unwittingly, then he shall offer a she-goat a year old for sin offering, and the priest shall make atonement for the soul that erreth when he sinneth unwittingly before Jehovah to make atonement for him. He shall be forgiven. Ye shall have one law for him that doeth aught unwittingly, for him that is homeborn among the children of Israel, and for the stranger that sojourneth among them. But the soul that doeth aught with a high hand, whether he be homeborn or a sojourner, the same blasphemeth Jehovah, and that soul shall be cut off from among his people, because he hath despised the word of Jehovah, and hath broken his commandment. That soul shall utterly be cut off. His iniquity shall be upon him. Now, they had some very strict guidelines for things under the old law, and you continue to see some of that throughout. But here it is: we have Jesus, and Jesus is able to look upon us and go, you know what, you know, I know what it's like, and I'm there, you know, compassionate, you know, caring. Now I'm going to say this, you know, of course, it's probably not any surprise that I'm not a huge fan of Facebook. I don't like the fact that that gives anybody with an IQ less than 70 an opportunity to open up their mouth and spout off whatever they want. I'm not a fan of that. I'm also not a fan of brethren getting on, right or wrong, and saying things that, you know, are just, you know, absolutely, they could be offensive for no reason, you know, for absolutely no reason. I'll give you an example. I saw a post if you've seen on Facebook, I've been marked safe from whatever, and it has like a little blue flag. I don't know if you've seen that. A member of the church, put up that they had been marked safe from, being a part of, and it named off all these different religious cults and denominations. And I was like, man, that may be true. It may be that you are not following in that way, and you can be thankful for that. But what do you think is going to happen when anybody from any of those groups reads that? You think they're going to be like, you know what? They're right. I need to follow that way. No, they're going to be, pretty angry. Matter of fact, this one that I saw, there's a couple of guys that got on there and they were a little upset. But this one guy said, you know what? I think that you're young enough that you can still come over to a Christocentric point of view that's more loving and kind, and I was like, that's what people believe that they're following. They look at something and go, well, this is nice. I want to follow this because this is nice. And you know what? I think we need to preach on those things, and I think that we need to follow that very much. But what you see is one person, the person that made the post originally, they ended up saying, you know what, I recognize that all these denominations are wrong and they're not following the truth, and I'm gonna make a post about it. And so they're teaching the truth. This other person has no care for the truth, but wants to be all loving and kind, and really what both of those people need are both of those things. John 4 verse 24, God is a spirit, and they that worship him must do what? Worship in spirit and truth. We need to have the right attitude when we're doing things, and we need to do it in the right way. Does that mean that I don't want you to think that I'm kind of doing this whole snowflake thing, whatever it is, that, we don't need to say things that are needful. No, we need to say things that are needful. I just think that we need to be a little cautious in the way that we say it, because you know what? I'm going to offend somebody, whether I like it or not, just by preaching. I've done that on multiple occasions, and sometimes I've had people that would come up and they'd say, well, you know what, preacher, you stepped on my toes today, and I just make that classic remark, well, I'm sorry, I was just aiming for your heart. But that's, we're going to have to teach the truth. There's no doubt about that. We just don't need to unnecessarily offend at the same time. I'll give you a little example about it too. I had this gone to this mechanic shop, and and he was he specialized in foreign cars. We're buying an American-made car from him, but I was like, well, how is it, working on these foreign vehicles? Because he had all these BMWs and stuff, and he said, they're overpriced, and they're not worth it, and that's why I stay in business. And because, he said, BMWs are always breaking down, and it costs a ton to fix them. And he said, and Volvos, do the same thing, and it takes a lot of effort to fix them. And so, yeah, Mercedes, you want to get up in these high-priced vehicles, it takes a lot to fix them. And he's like, and that's why I do well. And so I was just kind of repeating some of that information in the sermon, completely forgetting that one of our brethren had just bought a BMW. And guess what I did? I offended them. I didn't mean to, but I offended them. Lucky for me, that thing broke down like a week later. And I was like, justified, everything's fine. But, when it comes down to it, we don't need to unnecessarily offend people. So, we're not going to be able to do that 100%. We're not going to keep ourselves from offending people. Some people are just featherweights and will be offended at the drop of a hat. But you do...
At the same token, I think we got to be careful also, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole Facebook, but a lot of people put things out on Facebook, and it's your
Yeah.
My opinion is just as worth as much as just as your opinion, but if you respond to it, then all you do is just go back and forth and you start getting into a big fight.
Yeah.
And we're doing it, and the brethren are doing it right in a public forum on
Yeah.
Facebook.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean a hill of beat. Now, if it's doctrinal, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But a lot of stuff that you said on Facebook is political, and especially with the situation we've got going on for the past year. And guys, we got to quit this. We got to get
Yeah.
off of that.
Yeah, I know.
You like the mask or not, that's fine. Whether I like the mask or not, that's fine. But it's not doctrinal, and we don't need to be arguing about it on Facebook or whether or not to get the shot or any of this stuff.
Yeah.
We got to quit. We really do.
Yeah. Well, we don't need to cause any problems, that's for sure. You know, I think a lot of people, when they're looking at some of the stuff going on right now, they're just thinking, well, you know, I know some people are thinking, well, the health and safety of other people on both sides of the issue. And so, you know, I kind of see it from both ways. But, you know, I especially when it comes to doctrinal things, I can't tell you how many times I've seen brethren, especially, you know, I've seen a lot of preachers doing this where someone will say something and another preacher will get on and say this. And I'm thinking, you know what? If I were lost and I saw these guys, I'd be like, I'm not going there. I'm not, I don't want any part of that. I mean, yeah. Opinions aside, you know, when it comes to truth, if you can't, man, if you're going to argue over that stuff in front of everybody, I even had this one person that, oh man, he brought up on Facebook, that somebody, you know, he brought up somebody who was like having trouble in their marriage, and I wrote him and I was like, you know what? We knew that without you pointing it out, buddy. You shouldn't have done that. And he was like, well, I knew what needed to be done, and that's what I did. And I was like, well, you're arrogant for having done that, because how do you know what they need, and why does everybody else need to know it? That's not right. You know, if they need some help, let them go to somebody. You don't need to blast it all over Facebook. You know, it's sad. One day I hope Facebook is eliminated and there's no social media. I don't know. Being interconnected is not as cool as I thought it was going to be. You know, let's go back to emails. How about that? Let's do emails. Well, we got a few minutes here left. Let's look at verse 3. It says, "And by reason thereof is bound, as for the people, so also for himself, to offer for sins." And of course, you have the weakness here of the high priest that is contrasted with the power of Christ. And of course, that's what's going on throughout all of this, is showing one thing, and how when Christ comes into the picture, he's so much better than whatever that previous thing was. And here it is again. You have the weakness of the high priest's position in relation to Christ, because it says, it says, "And by reason thereof is bound, as for the people, so also for himself to offer sins." And so, he's got to do it. He's got to offer those sacrifices for everybody, especially, including himself. So that all has to be done. And yet Christ doesn't have to do that. He did it once for all. Let's see. What time do we end at 7:40? Oh, man. I thought we'd get another verse in here, but we'll pick up at verse 4 next time. Anybody have any comments as we close out?